to just live by themselves. They're to live together. And the place that God put them to live, to fix that fundamental problem, was in family. And as long as families involve human beings, and 99% of families involve human beings, you're going to have messed up things happening. And you older couples know this. Jackie and I have been married 32, 33 years. And what we have come to realize, you think, okay, after 30 years, we're just, autopilot. We're going to nail it. Everything's going to be fine. People are laughing like, oh, good Lord. You never arrive marriage-wise because you keep being a human being. And so the family project, myself and I, another good friend at Focus on the Family named Leon Worth, he's the one who generally came up with the idea, and it was based off of the first project thing that we did, which was the Truth Project. And that was basically a worldview kind of class to understand how Christianity was true and how broad it was and how it touched so many different areas of life. And it was so successful, and people kept asking, so what is Focus going to do next? And it took us really a long time to think about what we were going to do. And it was Leon who came up with the idea, because he's a genius. What if we do something on family? Being Focus on the Family. And so he pitched the idea, put a proposal together, and it didn't fly. Okay? And so we went back to the drawing board, pitched it, and finally it took. And the ministry, the directors, Jim Daly and everybody else said, okay, yes, let's do this. And so Leon came to me and said, okay, we've caught the lion, now what are we going to do with it? And I helped him. I had been developing and working on a book that was basically a theology of family, but not in the sense of how do you have healthy, happy family relationships, but what is it that family means in the Christian story? And it was interesting because even Focus on the Family, okay, we had been operating for 30, 35 years. We didn't even really have a theology of family, if you will. We had, as I like to say, Bible verses. We were talking in this way. If a secular journalist came to us and said, so explain to me why the family matters for Focus on the Family, we would, talk about all the social importance, breakdown of the family and the impact that has and things like that. But if they asked us why it matters for our faith, about the best we could do, and it's not bad, is we would quote Bible verses. Again, nothing wrong with that. Those verses are true. But to have a cohering theory, a theology of why it is that family matters. And not just that it matters, but what is it about God? And then what is it about us as God's creation and the fact that he has put us in families? That's the story that needs to be told. And so Leon and I put our heads together with a number of other people at Focus and said, that's what we want to do. And there were some who said, well, we want it to be a thing that helps couples. Well, yes, but there's a lot of marriage curriculums like this. It needs to tell God's story. And so the way we would describe it to people as Leon and I developed it, and some other people, were developing it from writing on napkins and things like that to rough drafts and working through it. And that probably took us a year to do. The way we would explain it to people is the family project, in a sense, is not about family. It is about who we are as human beings. And not just who we are as human beings, but who we are in light of who God is. And so, in a sense, we thought about calling it the Human Project because it addresses the way that it starts in like those first two sessions and the art. I was responsible for the art. The art, if you hated the art, then that's I get the blame for that. But I love art and what it communicates, and that Gauguin painting. I'm going to ask you a quiz. What was the name of the painting? 3 questions. It was a long time ago. You're not going to get it exactly right, but who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Gauguin, very secular guy. We started it because when we turn off the lights at night and put our head down on our pillow from earliest ages, those are the questions that we ask. And if we don't ask them exactly like that, we're asking the question, do I matter? Is there reason for my existence? Is all this important? They are natural questions that God has put with each one of us. He made us seekers, to yearn for him, to look for him. There is no culture on the earth anywhere where they don't ask those kinds of questions. And so that's where we wanted to start, in the sense of, it doesn't matter who you have in your group. You know, if you have Billy Graham or the most lost individual that you can think of, let's start where that person will be. And it's the fundamental question of, who am I? Why am I here? And where am I going? And Gauguin got that right. It's about the only thing that he got right. So let's start answering those questions. And knowing that the answers are going to take that individual to God, and then from God know that he created us not to be alone. And I think Genesis 2:18, for it is not good for man to be alone. It's one of the most profound statements. I studied philosophy in graduate school, so I'm interested in these big questions. I think it's one of the most profound statements in all of human literature, because it says the most important thing about what it means to be human. You are not meant to be alone. We go crazy. We talked about that, I think, in the second session. You go crazy if you're alone. And it's interesting, as we went through all of this stuff, me and Leon being the writers of it and knowing the things that we wanted to communicate, and then we participated with a film company, a development company in Santa Monica, California. They were associated with the people, and some of the people who did The Passion of the Christ, and Braveheart, actually, and We Are Soldiers. Braveheart, I got to hold one of the Braveheart swords that they used in the movie. That was pretty cool. But they were involved in these movies, and we're the ones that hired them to do the shooting and the production and all that kind of stuff, and we worked very, very closely with them. But we had the idea, and then they have the kind of the creative, and you know, we had a great working relationship, but it was like, they want to tell it this way, and we're like, no, it needs to be this way. And telling that idea and that concept of how profound it is that we cannot live without other people is very significant. So that's a big, big statement. And that God says, I made you for others. Because as you know in there, it's the issue of the Trinity. God says, we are three. One divine being, entity, in three mysterious persons. One God in three, but still one. And God is saying, we created you. Let us create you in our image. But Adam by himself, he did not represent the Trinitarian image of God. That is the center of it, of the Truth Project or the Family Project, is to understand you are made for others. And that when you live disconnected from others, bad things happen. It's interesting, one story that we weren't able to tell in the video That's why I was talking about the production company. We're like, we couldn't fit everything in, but when you helped create this and you know the really good parts to you, like, no, you can't leave that out. We've got to have that. There's one story. He was a king, and he was a king of one of the Roman areas of Europe, early Middle Ages, and really a remarkable man. And he was before the Renaissance, but really a Renaissance man, and he did all kinds of experiments. One experiment that he wanted to do was he wanted to see if people who were active or sleeping digested food better. So what he did was he fed two guys a big meal. One guy he had go out and be active. The other he had sleep. When they both came back, 4 hours or whatever, he killed them both and had their insides examined to see who digested better. You know who? It's about the same, okay? Another one, he did a number of those things. He wanted to see if the soul, and when the body died, when it went to heaven, when it left the body. So he built a box, and he put somebody in there, and there were little holes in there, and they waited until he died. And then they had a hole in the top to see when the soul would leave. Well, guess what he found? There is no soul, because he didn't see anything, So he's just this crazy innovative guy. But this one research project that he did, he wanted to find out humanly what is the original human language. If you take a group of children and do not teach them a language, what language is going to come out of them? So what he did was he took a number of babies that were born, within a couple weeks' time, set them aside. They were going to be raised by people, changed, cared for, fed, but they were never going to hear any human language. They were never going to be interacted with face to face. What language do you think, he was wondering, Latin or something like that, what language do you think those kids started to speak? Shrieking. Yes, if they would have lived. That's the dramatic nature is, yes, you would think, you see the story of the kids in the Romanian orphanages and things like that. There's tremendous film footage on YouTube of things like that. But these kids didn't live. They got fed, they got changed, they got protected from the elements, but it is not good for man to be alone. Profound. So God brings every one of us into the world in a what? In a family. That's not just a Western ideal. It's not just an American ideal. It's not just a suburban ideal. As a friend of mine once said, everywhere you find a new baby born, you're likely to find a mother somewhere in the vicinity, right? And everywhere you go, how do you think that mother feels about that new baby coming into the world? We don't even have to answer that question, right? Because we can even think, if we're honest, like, okay, we live here in America, but we were talking about folks in Mongolia. The Mongolians, how do they feel? No, they're human, okay? Everybody is excited about that new life. And if that child is not cared for, if that child is not loved, we come from the love of a mother and a father. Literally their physical love. And we are brought into the love between the mother and the father. When our kids were born, we just wept. It's just an amazing thing. That is the human nature. And the idea is for families to hang together. There is nobody who you can say, you know what, I've never known my parents, I've never been loved by my parents. And any of us as human beings go, wow, what was that like? I mean, that's interesting. You know what? It breaks our heart because we know that is not what humans are made for, right? And it's family that shows forth the image of God as we get to participate, if you will, in an earthly, mysterious kind of Trinity. Okay, we don't really understand three gods, but one being. But how can they be three different when they're one? But the family's the same way. My wife and I are one flesh. I mean, not literally, but literally. Okay, but I'm here. She's back in Colorado Springs. Our kids are of our flesh, literally, but not literally too, because they're all out doing their own thing. Each of us are a mystery. And as we were creating the family project, we get single adults who would say, well, yeah, this is great, but what if I'm not married? What if we're not married? What if we don't have kids? I mean, what does the family project have to say to us? What's the answer to that? I've never met a clone. You must be a clone, No. The fact that you exist, you came from the passion and the intimacy of a man and a woman. And you came into the world through that passion, and that passion was experienced when you came into the world, when they brought you home, and pretty much, hopefully, every day since then. You are a part of that Trinity. It's what it means to be human again. And so going from that into, just what family means from there, but the foundation of it was to answer the question, what does it mean to be human? And who is God? What is his nature? And how do we reflect that nature? And then to see the consequences of it. And one of the big sessions is what we call the man has become like one of us. The session on the fall. And that is just profound. One of the things in there that I think was so significant was a painting that we presented by William Blake. William Blake was the illustrator of an early edition of John Milton's Paradise Lost. And do you remember it was called Satan Gazing Upon the Caresses of Adam and Eve? It's this funky kind of painting where it was kind of a triune sort of thing because Adam and Eve are here caressing one another. And Satan, William Blake has Satan hovering above them, looking down. And what William Blake was communicating to us is Satan saw something that represented the image of God. It wasn't just that he saw humans and wanted to corrupt them and make them fall. He saw man and woman being man and woman. And he said, as we say in the project, hey, I know what that looks like, and I hate that. And you can't overemphasize that word hate. I despise that. I cannot put up with it. I will not tolerate it. And he goes and attacks it. Your family, my family, the families at Focus, I mean, they are being attacked. And as I like to say, Satan is not a mischief maker. He's not just wanting to key your car, or give you a flat tire. Many of us think that. Well, my car won't start. Gosh, Satan's really after me. You have no idea. I think about this picture of wildebeest out on the African plain going into, what are those animals that, not a deer, a gazelle, exactly. I mean, digging into a gazelle's body, just ripping it limb from limb. That is Satan toward God, and it's Satan towards those things in the world that represent and show forth God's image. Human life, the family, the relationship between husband and wife, the issue of gender. Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. There's something deeply, deeply divine and holy and sacred in the fact that humanity comes in two models, male and female, and it's true everywhere you go. And I don't know if you have heard about this guy, Bruce Jenner, right? I actually have a friend who said, I have no idea what that's about. Like, really? He goes, you know what, I just don't watch the news. I go, good for you, as weird as that is. But those things are being attacked. The family is being ravaged. Our children are being ravaged. Probably this summer, I'll talk about that in just a minute, but we are going to have same-sex marriage in every state of the union. And it's very important to understand that that's not just bad because it moves away from what's traditional and what's good and what's wholesome. It is attack upon, it's Satan looking upon the caresses of Adam and Eve and going, I need to break that up. The Bruce Jenner thing, the transgender thing, is Satan saying, okay, those people down there, they pretty much have the male and female thing right. That represents God in a mysterious way. I need to break that up. And he's doing it. We need to know that as Christians. Many people think, well, you know, those guys in the church, those guys that focus on the family, they care about these issues only because they're stuck in the 50s and 40s, you know, and they want things to be wholesome in the way things were. No, they matter because of who God is and what he created us to be, and that Satan is trying to mar that picture in a very profound way. So I was going to talk to you more about how we produced it, but I got to preaching, which can happen sometimes. I'll talk to you about the Supreme Court thing that's coming this summer, and a little bit of the Jenner thing and the significance of that. But we had a very, very good time filming it. We decided that we didn't want to just have one person teaching it like we did in the Truth Project with Del Tackett, who was immensely capable and really knew his stuff. We wanted to do a little bit more of a documentary, go around the world, talk to lots of people. And one of the things that we were interested in was talk to a lot of secular people, talk to a number of people who on a number of other issues don't agree with us, but on these particular things, science, sociology, they really get it. And so we did that, and it was fun. Irreplaceable, the movie, if you were able to see that, we had talked about doing the family project, 12 sessions, but also doing a full-length, theatrically released documentary. And that was going to be a little side thing, but it became a really big thing, and it really took off. And I think right up to some of the last moments, I didn't think that the documentary film, Irreplaceable, was going to work. But God had other plans. It did work, and it worked out quite nicely. But we shot all that stuff together, traveling around the world, being able to interview lots of different people. And it was interesting, just the way we shot it and the way that it developed. And Tim Sisrich, who is our friend from New Zealand, we did screen tests for all kinds of hosts. We got a lot of professional actors from Hollywood, and we just spent 2 whole days in Hollywood just having these people come through doing screen tests for us. And some of them were really Hollywood people. Hi, and it was like, yeah, we need somebody, great people, but we need somebody a little bit more human. We just saw all kinds of different people. And then we just didn't find anybody, and we thought, let's call Tim, our friend in New Zealand, because he has media background and TV background and communication. And we brought him in, and he did a screen test for us, and he was just fantastic. But he was a good friend, and we knew of him, and he was good. I want to open it up for questions in just a minute. If any questions just about how you did this, why you did this, what in the world were you thinking when you did this, I'm happy to just answer any of that curiosities that you might have. But the big thing is, we created this over probably 2 or 3 years, and it is your little baby that you have finally, through many travails, birthed. And you love it. You think it's the most beautiful baby in the world, but you send it out into the world. And you hope that people will love it half as much as you do. And so we sent the baby out to you guys, and you got to spend some time with the baby. And very interested just to kind of see the reaction and what did you think? And, the idea that it would make any difference in people's lives is really quite humbling. But Kevin, and Dean, and has had me here to speak, and I've been able to do this with many groups around the country, just to go connect with groups that have gone through it, and just hear and see the impact and the difference that it has made in your life. And that the Holy Spirit does something tremendous in that we think it will have this impact, or, we put these different things in there and, well, this will create a certain experience. But no, in the small groups, the Holy Spirit just takes it where he wants it to go. And you individuals come to much brighter conclusions than things we ever meant. And sometimes people, well, the way you did that, and you meant to communicate this, and it was just brilliant. We're like, yeah, that's exactly what we meant to communicate, when actually we had no intention. But that's how the Holy Spirit works with the church and with his people, the church. So I said I was going to talk about the Supreme Court coming up this summer and a little bit about the Bruce Jenner thing, but I just want to take questions, if you want to ask questions about that, or just about the project, or things that you didn't understand, or gripes. Why in the world did you do this? We can open it up. Yeah.
I love your theology of the family and how the family reflects God's design, his desire to imprint his image on humankind. My question is, what, as far as Focus on the Family goes, what was your guys' hope in terms of the impact that would have in Christians' lives and churches? What was your hope for that?
That's a great question, because there was a very definite answer. And this may seem weird, but it was for people to understand how big God is. And Christians say that, but to understand how big God is in relation to who we are. Again, that thing of there are these burning questions that each of us have within us. And it's not just about, can we go to heaven when we die, or what do we do with our sins, but is there purpose in my life? Is there meaning in my life? And so in a sense, the family stuff was sort of secondary, and we even thought, this will be the gospel project, because it really is about, here's God. He has a father's heart. He wants you to be his child. And then the family is the earthly kind of thing that demonstrates and is a picture, an icon of what's happening between you and God. And God has put you in an earthly family, but he wants to bring you into a heavenly family where he is your father. So that was, 80% it. You know what? Let's tell the story of God. And what we wanted people to really kind of come away with is like, wow, I've never understood Christianity that way. I never understood God that way. I never understood why we were created the way we are that way. because it's big. And studying philosophy as I, continue decade after decade in my faith, have understood that Christianity is so much bigger and truer and grander than we can imagine, because it really does answer the deep questions and more that humans are asking and yearning for and desiring. So that's a great question, and that's really what it was. And if people pick up some stuff about the family, that's great too. And I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's understanding who God is. And for non-believers to come in and say, okay, if this is what Christianity is about, then I'm in. But I thought it was just about being good till you get to heaven, and, no, it's much, much more than that. It's interesting because creating it, the planning, who's your target audience? As if, it's only Christians, or it's only unsaved people. It's people. Again, that's that human thing. What is it that is common to all humans? And so what we said was, we want to speak to Christians about your faith and what it's like, but we also want to say that in such a way that non-believers wouldn't go, okay, I don't even know what you're talking about, or that just doesn't concern me. We wanted to do it in such a way that it speaks to humans. And for us as the church to understand that. We think, well, we'll talk this way in the church and this way away from the church. No, speak to human beings, as God made us to be, and show that he has answers to those things. And that's why we had that first session, that the needs for what it means to be human. We need to be needed, and we need to have significance. We cannot live without either of those things. And again, that speaks to the saved and the unsaved. So it was really both of them. And I think that's important for us to understand, is always speak so that the person you're speaking to knows what you're saying, saved or unsaved in that way. Kevin, any questions? There are just 101 great stories when we went out in the field to shoot and stuff like that. I have to think of some. Did you? Or were you just? Okay. Ooh. Yeah. That last line? We have. The Truth Project, the Family Project, the Household, what will be next? What's the next thing that is coming? The Household Project is interesting, the Home Project. One of the things that we're talking about, and we're only talking about it a little bit internally. In fact, I had a meeting with some people, and I said, well, the guy who is actually going to make the decision, he doesn't know anything about it, so don't go straight to him. We're internally kind of making the case and, making sure that everything's lined up so it doesn't get crossways with anybody. You know how that is. You've got to make sure everybody's in line. So we're like 2% maybe down this road, but something called the Love Project. And essentially, just like family, love. What is love? Oh, I love cheesecake. I love my kids. What is it that God is love? It's not God enjoys love. God is partial to love. God is love. We think about that. Love, God, sex, family. Those things mean a zillion different things, don't they? To a zillion different people. We as the church have to be able to explain what is love and what is not love. It's not, oh, I love cheesecake and I love my wife and kids, or I love Jesus, you know? And so it would be addressing not just love in the marriage relationship or love in the parenting relationship, but what is the theological, human, and divine nature of love? Looking at C.S. Lewis's Four Loves. Why is God love? And why does every people group in the world from the beginning of time, why is love their operating system, if you will? Looking into that. And then perhaps working with Gary Chapman, his book, The Four Love Languages, and just all the incredible work that he's done on love. And like we did in those 3 sessions in the Family Project, children, mothers, fathers, yes, 3 of them, children, mothers, and fathers, things like that. We would address that to parental relationships, friend relationships, dating relationships, marriage relationships. But it's only a napkin kind of idea at this point, but it makes all the sense in the world to me. So if everybody else is at Focus is as smart and insightful as that, then we'll do it. But it's just, what we're, we'll debate, we'll argue, we'll, try to make the case. But again, I think that's significant. God is love. What is love? I mean, we can't understand God if we don't understand that full nature of what love is. So, keep it quiet, because there's some folks at Focus who don't know yet that we're doing that, and so it's our secret. Pray for that, though, seriously. Just that, what God Focus, help them do what you want them to do, and that they make the right choice and decision. Did somebody else? This summer, the Supreme Court, probably at the end of June, are going to hand down their decision on same-sex marriage. They're looking at 2 kind of legal questions that really have to do with the states recognizing marriage laws from other states. It's a very, very complex question. The kind of common knowledge or common understanding is that we're going to get same-sex marriage in all 50 states, that it will become a constitutional right that, by the end of the summer, boom, there we go. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. My gut is that it's not going to turn out like anybody thinks it's going to turn out, either on their side or on our side. I think the court is going to take kind of a third or fourth way. Very interestingly, a week ago, I had a phone conversation. I have the honor and the privilege to, by the work I do, having a number of very, very good friends deep in the other side of the issue. And this guy, he is a law professor at Yale, and he is probably one of the most learned and well-entrenched lawyers on the other side. Very, very well respected, knows all the Supreme Court justices who are kind of against us on these issues. I had a 2-hour conversation with him on the phone. And he told me 3 things that I thought was very interesting. He said, 1, I do not think that the Supreme Court is going to declare same-sex marriage a constitutional right. Okay? But that's different than same-sex marriage being legal in all 50 states. They could say that states do have to recognize the marriage laws from other states. Okay, so what that would mean is, you two, you radicals here, you're going to go get married in Massachusetts. Well, actually, you two guys, okay? You're going to go get married in Massachusetts, and then you're going to drive straight to Alabama and say, hey, we want to get married. And, or we got married in Massachusetts, now Alabama has to recognize our same-sex marriage. What they will do is they'll have, and I told this professor that, I said, you know, I'm sure you guys already have it all lined up as everybody's going to go to a state where it's legal now. They're going to just beeline it to each of these different states. And by that afternoon, you know, this is going to be challenged in all these different states. The difference there is very significant because if they do not judge it a constitutional right, then that's a big thing to me because it cuts out well, this is a human right that, you know, you are denying us our basic fundamental human rights. That, you know, the emotional thing that I think has been so successful with them because it puts us in a position like, yeah, you shouldn't have your human rights. You know, no, we don't think marriage equality is a good thing. The court will be saying, we don't think it's a fundamental human right that same-sex couples be able to get married. But Glenn, you're saying that they'll be able to do that anyway. That's a legal thing. It still will be very, very unfortunate, and the impact of that will be huge. But it is different in that way. That's the one thing that he said. The other thing that he said is, I don't think the court will determine that it, like most other courts have, that it's animus that drives opposition to same-sex marriage. Basically, what each of the courts have said is the only conceivable reason that anybody could be against same-sex marriage is because you hate gay and lesbian people. For the Supreme Court not to say that, or to say that that is not the motivation, that's another big thing. Because when that gets pushed back on us, well, you just hate us. You know what? The Supreme Court didn't buy that argument. Okay? That's another significant thing. The third is, and this is very interesting, because I was telling about a friend of mine, and my friend he was on one of the Sunday morning talk shows, and the person that he was debating said, well, this is going to come down to a constitutional question, whether this is constitutional. And my friend said, no, this is going to come down to what Kennedy thinks. And my lawyer friend said, that's exactly right. That's huge. And Justice Roberts and Kennedy both probably do not want it to come down to just one person. So what they're going to do is internal politics on the court, and they are going to come up with a compromise between either this or either this, and it will be some third or fourth way that nobody is anticipating so that it won't be, you know, just relying on Kennedy. Now, again, at the end of the day, I think that we're going to have same-sex marriage in all 50 states eventually, if not right away. But it is not going to be like our opponents think it's going to be. Marriage equality, you know. President Obama sent out a tweet this week, love is love. You know, I mean, just silly stuff. That's going to undermine all that kind of stuff. But again, he said, you know, he doesn't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen, so it'll be interesting to see. But the consequences of it are going to be big, because what it really means is mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, male and female, don't really matter for the family. The family is just any group of people who just have warm feelings for one another. And that's big. That's very big. I'm going to wrap up. Any comments? Any other questions? I'm so glad, I mean, we're so glad at Focus on the Family that you guys were able to go through it. We hope and pray that it was valuable to you, that it spoke something into your life that maybe you had never considered, thought about, and that you can take these ideas into your family, into your marriage, and they will continue to feed you month after month, year after year, and that you will be able to teach them to your children and to your grandchildren and things like that, so that we as Christians know what it means to be human, who God is in his fullness, and why he put us in families and why families matter and how they reflect his very image. That's a wonderful, grand story. Blessings to you. Thank you so much.